Сьогодні продовжуємо ще в грудні початку розмову з адвокатом Данилом Білаком, канадцем, який тепер на посаді в адміністрації прем'єр-міністра України, про правдивий поступ у різних сферах державного і громадського життя в Україні.
Ідеї, зусилля, успіх. Спонсоровані Українською кредитовою спілкою. Добрий вечір, дорогі глядачі. Нині маємо велику честь і приємність вітати пана Данила Білака, який останньо отримав цікаву нову працю, яка переглядає інвестиції України чи прем'єра-міністра. Вітаємо, пане Данило.
Дякую.
Чи я правильно описав вашу працю? Вона якось така трохи скомплікована назва, так?
Ну, воно дуже просте. Я відповідаю за інвестиції з боку уряду в Україну.
So what does that mean? Like, how do you look for these investments that are supposed to come into Ukraine? How do you do that from Kyiv?
Well, there's a lot of interest in Ukraine from investors, particularly in four key areas that we focus on. Agriculture, agribusiness actually, infrastructure, energy savings, and high tech. Our office was created by the Cabinet of Ministers. I'm appointed by a regulation of the Cabinet of Ministers as director of, we're calling it Ukraine Invest, which is the investment promotion office of the country. And we are essentially, I'm the director of that office. I'm also the Prime Minister's chief advisor on inbound investment, to work with investors and trying to convince them that this is an attractive place to invest in. Not an easy task. We have, there are objective and subjective reasons why this is a difficult task. Objectively speaking, we have ongoing problems inside the country, especially with the law enforcement agencies and the courts. The stability of investment, that there's a strong impression abroad that Ukraine is not a secure place to invest in. Everybody understands the opportunities, everybody understands the economics, the compelling economics of investing in Ukraine. We're the third largest exporter of grains in the world. 38% of Ukraine's exports are in agribusiness. However, there are also subjective reasons, and none of the good news seems to get reported abroad, and all of the bad news gets front line. And there are reasons, external reasons why that happens. But there is a very pronounced movement forward in terms of the reform process and in terms of the changes ongoing in the country. I tell people consistently, I was appointed November 1st. I must have done 15 or 20 public presentations in different countries, not just in Ukraine since then. And it's very important to change the perspective and the reference point for what's happening in Ukraine. And I invite people to consider looking at Ukraine not from the perspective of 25 years, but from the perspective of the last two. Because really, Ukraine started building a country, a state, in the last 2 years after the Revolution of Dignity, Революції Гідності. For 25 years or 23 years before that, it was sort of a free-for-all of feeding at the trough for many of the elites and robbing the country blind. And we have the legacy of that. You don't change ingrained corruption and state gangsterism, if you like, overnight. But when you look at what has happened in Ukraine since the Revolution of Dignity, it's remarkable. There is no other country in the world that has done so much in such a small period of time in terms of macroeconomic stabilization. We lost, after the Revolution of Dignity, just to give you a perspective, we lost 30% of our GDP. We lost 60% of the value of Ukraine's currency and 7% of the country, when you consider the Donbass with Crimea. And 20% of the GDP of the country was basically in the Donbass, or Donbass centered, before that. So we've had what I call a massive market correction, if you like, where the whole nature of Ukraine's economy has changed. And we're still going through that upheaval in that process. But in those 4 areas, those are the 4 sectors where there are real gains to be made by investors, if we can just convince them that their investment is safe. And one of the things that I'm doing is I am trying to identify 5 or 6 what I call cities of the future, or oblasts of the future, which are essentially safe havens for private investors, where they don't have problems with the pravoochronní orgány, with the law enforcement agencies, with the courts, with the prokuratura, the SBU, the tax police, etc., where all of that is under control, and that you have a mayor and a city council, or an oblast head, governors they're called, and an oblast council that are investor friendly. And there are some: Lviv, Ivano-Frankivsk, Chernivtsi, Ternopil, Mykolaiv, parts of Cherkasy, very, very open for investment, very happy investors. Fujikura employs 3,000 people in Lviv. Leoni, another large Japanese auto parts manufacturer, has just opened a second plant in Ivano-Frankivsk that they will employ 8,000 people in Ivano-Frankivsk Oblast. That's huge for a fairly depressed small area. Sumitomo, again doing auto parts manufacturing, is going to open another plant in Ternopil. So, but this is the story that doesn't get out. You hear this. What we tend to have in Ukraine is this downward spiral of negative reporting. The government isn't doing anything about reforms. No reforms are taking place. There are no reformers in the cabinet. And this is actually from people who should know better, people in our own community, people who wish Ukraine well in the foreign media, or who are in parts of think tanks, etc. And they buy into this. A lot of this is being promoted by external forces, and the Russians spend $100 million a year on propaganda. It's no accident that all the bad things in Ukraine end up on the front pages. Ukraine has not yet gotten to the stage where it is developing a communication strategy, and that's something that we're doing actually as part of this changing the perception of investment, but getting its message to key media markets around the world: Washington, New York, London, and Berlin. You can't take a knife to a gunfight. You have to ramp up, and that's something that we're trying to do. And it's not propaganda, and it's not spin. It's taking the positive things that are happening in the country and explaining them to the world. This is the problem of Ukrainian history, actually. If you don't explain your history, somebody will do it for you. And they will do it through the prism of their own view of the historical relationship that they have with Ukraine.